Video được Việt hóa bởi Ngọc Tân từ group tài nguyên dựng phim. Nghiêm cấm các hành vi lít về rồi bán cho thằng khác. Mọi ý kiến đóng góp xin gửi về Facebook Quỳnh Ngọc Tân.
An essential tool for color correction on the color page is the color scopes. Again, this is something that looks really complicated, but it's actually really simple, and it will help you a lot. Down in the lower right-hand corner of our interface, behind our keyframes, we have our color scopes. We can click this little button to expand these into their own window. And by default, they might look something like this. This is, again, where sometimes you get a little overwhelmed. You go, oh gosh, what is all this? Well, let's make things a little bit more simple here. Let's go up here to the right-hand corner, and we're just going to click on the one screen single view. And here where it says parade or whatever it says for you, click on waveform. And let's click on this little button to open the settings and click on Y. And I'll even turn off colorize here for a minute. So here we have a scope called the waveform. This is really important to know about when it comes to color. What this is a graph of the brightness of the pixels in the shot, as well as their horizontal position. So if there is something in the shot that is on the left, it's on the left here in the waveform. But if it's on the top or bottom of the shot, it won't necessarily be on the top or the bottom of this waveform. It'll only be towards the top if it's bright. It'll be towards the bottom if it's dark. So let's find a shot that is a little bit easier to look at here. I'll just do a quick correction on this shot, just so we can see what's going on. So here we have the graph of our shot, and if I take my offset and I push it up or down, we can see the graph move up and down all together. That's because the brightness of the entire shot is going up when I go to the right, and the brightness is going down when I go to the left. Now let's take the brighter parts of the shot and boost them up with the gain. And we'll see the graph acts a little bit differently. It kind of stretches up to the top, but it leaves the bottom where it is. And the opposite happens when I move the lift. It stretches the bottom, but it leaves the top basically where it is. And if I move the gamma, it will leave the top and bottom sort of where they're at, and it will move the middle. If I had a shot, say, just use a mask here. We'll talk about these in a second. But where it's really dark on the left side and it's bright on the right side, we'll see there's kind of this peak on the right side, and it's down towards the bottom on the left side. So again, it's the brightness of the pixels versus where they're at on the horizontal axis. And as I take this mask and move it, we'll see it kind of darkens down more and more of the shot. So we can use this to not only figure out how bright our shot is, but we can figure out kind of where things are on the screen and how bright they are. So for instance, we have this dark garbage can right here. And you might be wondering, okay, how dark is that garbage can? Well, on the screen, it looks black. But here on our waveform, black is actually 0. And it looks like it's touching black, but it's maybe not completely black. And so if I were to push this offset down, now we're crushing everything in that garbage can all the way down to pure black. And so when we're talking about color correction, we generally want to make sure that if something is supposed to be bright, that it looks bright not only on our screen, but also our waveform tells us it's bright. And if something's supposed to be like pitch black, like no detail at all, that should be down right about at 0 on our waveform. Now, should this be black with no detail at all? Probably not. So I can bring the lift up just a touch so that we do have a little bit of detail here in the shadows. And we can really use this waveform to figure out how bright things actually are, not just how bright they look on our monitor. Because one thing about color correction is your eyes can kind of fool you. For instance, if I were to make this shot a lot more blue, right now we can see that this is tinted blue. But if you wait a couple minutes and you look at the same shot, after a while you kind of stop noticing how blue it is. And for me, it's right about now, my brain kind of stops noticing the blue tones and just starts kind of looking at the image as a whole, just kind of relative to itself. And then once we turn this off, we can see how far blue this was actually pushed. And so your eyes will kind of get used to the image, not only color, but also brightness. And so scopes help you figure out how bright and what color things are because your eyes could be playing tricks on you. So that's the waveform. If we switch over from waveform into parade, a parade is just the same waveform 3 times, but it's for each channel. So red, green, and blue. And they're all kind of just squished together, put side by side. And so if something is really, really orange, the red waveform gets pushed up because the red channel is a lot brighter. Same thing, if it's really blue, the blue channel gets pushed up. If a color is neutral, that means it has equal amounts red, green, and blue. That's how you get something like white, gray, black, kind of the neutral tones. And so it's really nice to use the parade because you can find something that's white, like say his shirt right here, and that's right here on our waveform. And we can kind of do a white balance to his shirt. So I can kind of eyeball this little cloud right here on each of my channels. And I could do something like move my gain around until this is equal here, here, and here. And then looking over at my image, his shirt would be perfectly white. Now, we might not necessarily want it perfectly white, but if we are going for like a perfect neutral white balance, that would be a way to do it. So this parade scope is really, really helpful. I'll show you one more scope here, the vector scope. The vector scope is sort of like a big graph of these color wheels. The farther away all these little points are from the middle, the more saturated they are. And the direction is the hue. So again, if we push this really orange, we can see this kind of turn orange and go towards the orange direction in our graph. And same for blue, magenta, green. And so this is a great way to figure out just generally where your colors are at in the image. So if I want a slightly warm image, I can push this slightly warm, and I can really look at this data to see how much of my image is warm versus cool. So there are still some pixels here that are cool, but a lot of stuff is really warm. So that's the basics of using scopes.